Hi, it's What If Wednesday time with Susan Bennett Fisher and Martin Fisher, the co-founders of Body of Nine.
Well, good afternoon.
What if you could have more confidence in your parenting decisions? Huh. I'm a parent. We're parents. And we've had the fortune and opportunity to know our kids' natural numbers since they were young. And I would say that has really helped.
I think it's helped a lot. It's hard to sort of compare before and after because I didn't have it before. I came along 14 years ago. So a little bit further along, the children already knew their natural numbers when I came along. So I don't know what it would have been like not to know their natural numbers. I think it would have been a lot harder. And I would have put my own lens on what was happening instead of being able to see the way, or at least have some understanding of the way that they were seeing the world.
So one of the things that's kind of up in our space is that nurture plays a big role in how we parent our kids, how we were nurtured, what happens to them. And that nurture comes and lays itself on top of the nature that's there with your kids.
Because as we've said, and as for those that are new, we can explain that there are basically 9 physiologically different kinds of people in the world. And each of the centers in your body can be activated, but one of those 9 centers is active in you from birth and it determines your physical reality. We call that center your natural number.
Right. And in families, that natural number doesn't repeat. So what that means is we really don't understand our kids.
And in blended families, and there's a lot more blended families now than there were 20, 30 years ago, it's even more complicated because the numbers may repeat around the children. So the main message here is that your children are not like you. To some extent, you know that, but we want to reinforce that and bring it to your forefront of your consciousness that when you're making decisions about what is best for your children, because you love your children, you want to take care of your children, it is absolutely going to be what's best for them. But what's best for you and what was best for you when you were growing up is not necessarily, in fact, probably unlikely to be what's best for your children. And that can be a very hard step to get over.
So what Body of Nine helps you with is how do I parent at the level of their nature, taking into account the nurture that's happened, but going back to the nature. What is that child, no matter how old that child is, from birth till forever? You know, that your child is always your child and always needs to be supported in their unique presentation of who they are.
You have an amazing advantage over most people because now you understand that your children are not like you. And not only that, how they're not like you. So no matter what external influences appear for you and for your children, whether it's advertising, whether it's social media, whether it's anything that their teachers, their school, all these things are going to impact their nature by putting nurture, in quotes, because it's not always positive, on top of their nature. But you as a parent have the ability to know your children's nature in a way that no other place, no other area, and no other person can know.
So how does that translate to being a mom or a dad in the moment when you're parenting? So my children, I found out their numbers when they were quite young, and that was very, very helpful. So how that translated on a day-to-day basis was understanding, for example, that my natural number 2 daughter needs me to listen to her really carefully. She needs me to pay attention and to look her in the eye. When I do those things, our relationship is better. Her nature is supported. And the nurture can be better understood by both of us as a result of me understanding how to support her nature. The same thing is true for my natural number 7 child. She needs me to help her sort through the possibilities to find the most alive. So I bring my sixness in relationship with her 7, and together we're able to sort through the possibilities and find a path that's really helpful for her. My 8, she needs to be trusted. She really needs to be trusted. And that is always challenging as a parent, is how do I trust my kid with their own safety, no matter how old they are. And as our children move to adulthood, opening up to what they need, supporting that, and allowing them to move out into the world is also challenging. But again, much more helpful when we support their nature and go back to that nature.
So take a second and think back to those times that you remember with your parents. How often did they do something or say something and you think, well, I just wish that had been handled slightly differently? Because no matter how much they cared for you, no matter how much they love you, they didn't know that you were different than them. And their nurture and depending how old your parents are, they were dramatically influenced by the outside world, because the science of raising children is constantly in change, and the lessons and the ideas that were valid in the 50s and 60s when we were growing up are very different than the lessons and messages that were valid in the 80s, the 90s, even the last 10, 20 years. It's always changing, and we're working to change it yet again by bringing into this knowledge that your children are not like you.
And how they're not like you. Because yes, we all know that our children are not like us, and we look at them and we marvel and say, "Wow, how amazing!" and "Wow, that's really disappointing behavior. What can I do about it?" And then we take on those disappointments in our children as failures in ourselves, and that is so damaging to both ourselves and to our kids.
Because your children actually are very small adults at a very early age. I mean, to some extent, yes, they're, maybe 2, 5, 10, 12, 15, 18, 20 years old. And that transition from childhood to adulthood happens at different rates for different people, no matter what their natural number. And how you relate to them is not always as changeable as I think we've maybe led to believe.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is your natural number child, whatever they are, is responding to your natural number. And their ability to process what's going on is in their bodies. It's built into them. So you can pretend that you didn't just have an argument with your spouse. You can pretend that you're not worried about this, that, and the other. But your child knows. So part of the understanding that your child, while intellectually and mentally is still developing, their body comes out pretty much pre-packaged with that natural number.
So you're saying that they're using their sensor, their ability, their understanding, their way of experiencing the world through their body, aka through their natural number. Immediately. And that's whole. Yes. It works from the start.
Yes.
And then that I agree with you. I think that's true. And over time we make that less whole.
Yes. And we actually try and push people to process things with their head.
Right. To think through things, to plan things, to
disregard
intellectualize and disregard the core
messages of their body.
Yes.
Especially if, for example, a prime example, if you have a natural number, an odd natural number, 1 through 7, 1 through 9, and your child has an even number, how they process data and what they care about and how they decide what to do next is so completely different than the way that you do. It's almost unimaginable.
And we apply so much judgment to
Yes.
the differences in the way we approach life.
And also, we're not the only ones doing that. Their teachers, their friends, everyone's applying judgment to everything that goes on. And if you look at the damage that is done by social media and the awful things that you see happening on social media, the bullying and the bad comments, etc., that is all in people's heads. But our children and ourselves are processing how we feel with our bodies. And so supporting your child, because you know they're different, but now you can know how they're different. What do they need from you? How do they need to be validated? How do they need to be honored?
And supported.
And the world just isn't doing that.
No, it's doing the opposite.
Yes.
And as parents, you want nothing more than for your children to be happy. And you have no, and safe. Mm-hmm. But it's like the reality is you don't have much impact on that. So for me, I continually try to remember to go back to what my children need at that level of their nature, so they can sort through the rest of it with their nurture.
Yeah, validate their responses, because in any situation, their response is going to be different than yours.
Yes. It's going to mean something different than you think it means.
So trust your body.
Right.
Trust your instinct. Don't think about how would I like to have responded. Don't think about what would I have done in that situation.
And it's so easy for us to put our emotional responses to things our children do on top of them. So they come to you and they say, I want this. And you're like, no, you can't have that. You're wrong for wanting it. We do all these things that invalidate what that child is trying to say to us. And we actually miss the point because we don't know what language they're talking.
Yeah, part of the job of a parent maybe is to be a detective. What is it that's really happening here? What is the interaction really about? What is your child trying to say? Because it's very likely, certainly at the younger age, the words they use aren't going to be really reflective of what their bodies are trying to tell you. But
And they don't tell you everything anyway.
some of them may not have the words to express. Some of the natural
Yes.
numbers are really good at saying, well, I've been hurt and it feels bad. And others are not even aware of what they need.
Or why their feelings are there, or
you could
what's
ask them,
below it.
what do you need? And they may not know. So that's part of the detective. That's part of the enabling their superpower.
Yes. Supporting each natural number in the way that they're designed to be supported, so that they don't fall prey to their own self-doubts and they begin to come forward. So like if you have a 6 kid, for example, if you try to hold them down and you try to make them quiet and you try to slow them down, they lose their confidence in their natural way of being. And then they shut down and go away. Or you don't connect with your 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you don't give them eye contact, if you don't engage with them through your being and your eyes, you lose an opportunity to really hear what they're saying and for them to know that they've been heard.
Yes, and everybody uses their eyes. We like to think that some natural numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 are what we call eye connectors, whereas 5 through 9 are much more eye observers. Everybody uses their eyes. And its question is, what is happening with the eyes? Is there a state change? Is there a gift being given to you by the eyes, or are they just looking to see what's going on? You can think about that. You can look at it. You can understand. You can spend some time with each of your children and your partner and figure out, well, are they giving me a gift or are they just checking in? There's no wrong answer.
No, we're just different.
We're just different.
And just applying curiosity, wonder, and awe to other people helps an awful lot. Yes. So when you're trying to make a decision about how to properly parent your kid, get curious, explore wondrously, without judgment, without attachment. Really hard to do because we care so deeply about our children.
And that is not to say that there is not an educational component. Just because you have your child and you have a superpower doesn't mean that superpower is completely raw. In Susan's example about natural number 6, absolutely, let them go. Let them be wild, let them be crazy, but also explain there are some situations that perhaps it's people would appreciate just quietness for that second. If you're someone you go to church, someone's praying, there's a good time to be quiet, enjoy the energy of that prayer.
Yeah. And your kid's going to pick up on that.
Yeah. Kids are very, very smart. You already know that. Your child is smart. It's pretty likely that your child is smarter than the average because everybody is. It's like human.
Well, the point is they're whole at this level. And they only get broken if we take them away from their nature.
Yeah, and I think
we invalidate their nature.
Yeah, and I want to reinforce something that I said earlier. Your child's body comes out pretty whole. Your child knows in their body, how to feel. They know everything that's going on. They just can't express it. They can't process it. And part of our job as parents, I believe, is to helping our children process what they're doing and validate what is real for them.
And what their true strengths are.
Yes. And
what their gifts are, instead of make those things wrong.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the most important things about understanding what are the gifts and what are the validations and what is important to kids of each of the natural numbers. In our book, we actually talk quite a bit about kids. How do you parent? How do you support? How do you respond to your children in certain situations? So it's, if you want to learn more about that possibility, our book, Body of 9, Decode Your Natural Physiology and Discover Your True Self, available on Amazon, it's got a lot of information on how to be a better parent and how to support people of the other 8 natural numbers. Because in order to really to do that, you have to understand how they're different, both physiologically as well as behaviorally and spiritually. So it's so important to be curious about your children and to understand what they need and how that's different from yourself.
So here's a little bit of a more advanced method of doing this. It is very likely, based on our research, we've worked with 7,500 people, families, hundreds of families now, that if you have 2, 3, 4 children, that your children share the same natural number as their grandparents. So if one of your children gets on really well with one of their grandparents, you might actually go to that grandparent and say, how would you like to have been brought up? Ask the adult that's been through that can connect back to their nature. And maybe there's some hints in there about how your child, that grandparent, grandchild connection, can help you understand what that your child would like based on some information from an adult version of that same child. Just a thought,
Well,
something to
that
play
same
with.
natural number.
Yes.
They're very different people.
Yes, very different people with very different nurtures.
That's right. So there is some insight that's available from potentially from your parent for your children when there is that duplication, which does occur in usually one or two of your kids, and usually the older ones, as it turns out.
We don't know why. That's through observation.
Yes, just with our sample size, there's some indication that grandparents' natural numbers repeat in the older children. But there are four, so there are four to essentially repeat.
Yeah.
Although we tend to marry or procreate with a person whose natural number we're familiar with, so oftentimes that one is one of our parents, which then eliminates the possibility for any of our children to be that natural number.
So it gets a little more complicated. That's why I said
Yes.
it was kind of a sort of advanced step, but it's something worth looking into. And the reason that we see this is because we see it again and again, and we've come up with a theory that we're actually quite comfortable with, that we're used to receiving love from people's natural number centers.
Right. That people hug in very specific ways. And you can notice this about your kid. How does your kid like to hug you? What does that hug feel like? Do they wrap their throat around your throat? They might be a 1 if they do that. Do they hug you the way you hug them? They might be a 2 or a 9 in that situation. Actually, 9s often reach around and pat you on the back, in the middle of the back. So very different ways of being that are both physical and the way that we give love.
And just to reinforce things, the way that your children like hugging is going to be different the way that you do. Sorry, but
Yeah.
it's just your children are different than you.
Yeah, some of your kids may not even want to hug.
Yeah. So it's really, it seems overemphasizing, but your children are different than you. Every part of them, how they use their eyes, what they care about, how they move, how they hug, it's different than you.
Their motivations, their skills, their gifts are uniquely different. And what you need is not what they need. So figure out what it is that you need in a situation and then figure out what they need and do something different. Because if you do what you need, it's not going to be what they need.
And the impact of you putting your nature on top of their nature becomes nurture. And it is a useful tool for them.
Could be. Or it could be very invalidating.
I'm being positive here. The glass is
So
half full.
we do both of these things.
And at the same time, though, if you can tease out what it is their nature wants, that's what's empowering. That validation, that honoring, that ability to work with their superpower that's built into their body, that's going to supercharge their ability to move out into the world in a more pre-baked human as they leave the nest.
And understanding what each unique child needs makes a difference.
Makes a huge difference to them. And part of...
And to your relationship.
Yes. And part of the gift that you give to your children by validating them and supercharging them on the way they're forward is that they can do the same thing with their children. Once you let them know that you realize that they're different than you and that everyone in the family is different and their children are going to be different than them, it's starting to heal decades, generations of best effort, but not quite as successful child rearing.
Yes, because at the aside from the physiological illnesses, at the root of so much of human suffering is this lack of validation, this lack of understanding who we are. So if you can just make some efforts to understand your children better, it will help them to be healthier adults.
It's a nice shield for them to know that people are not like them as well. Most of their friends are pretty much not going to be like them. The people they hang out with are not like them. Their teachers are not like them. So if they know that people are not like them, then they can have a shield that their friends and the people they interact with, and certainly on social media, the stuff they hear is actually not about them. because those people are different. What they care about are different. How they see the world is different.
And that's okay.
It's-
And it's important.
It's very important to be able to understand that people are different
And how they're different.
and how.
Because that's the thing I see on a day-to-day basis is that fives are different in a five way. So they're similar because in their fiveness, and they need similar support and similar, and they offer similar gifts. They're not the same.
No.
They're similar.
How we process data is the same, but everything that affects us means that we've grown up in a different way. The models we've built as the five have changed. So how each of the natural numbers processes data is very, very much the same. The kind of things they care about are the same. But there are 8+ billion people on this planet, and everybody has a particular set different journey. You probably know that twins are born with different fingerprints. They also have different natural numbers.
Yep.
Triplets, the same thing. Everybody has a different path to take through the world. But there's only 9 different ways that your spacesuit takes you there.
And so learning those things makes you more effective as a parent. Even if you never know your kid's natural number, and even if you never, if you just understand the way in which different people are different and recognize that different people need to be supported different ways, you're on the road to better relationships with your children and more supported, more validated children. So I think that's probably enough for today.
I think that's enough.
Thanks for listening. We really appreciate it. If you've got questions for us, contact us through our website, bodyof9.com. And we have a lot of fun things coming up. Keep an eye on our website. Join our mailing list. You can do that on any page on the website. And you will get notified about what's going on and how to get identified and how to get your children identified. We have family identifications where everybody gets on Zoom, and no matter how old the kids are, if they're young, we just watch them play. If they are old enough to interact, we have conversation with them just like we would with you. And through our visual identification online on Zoom, we can tell you a lot more about the dynamics in your family.
And what to watch out for going forward. Because one of the things that we believe we can help you with is that we can say these are the dynamics, the problems are going to occur in the future.
And it doesn't matter how old your kids are to make this useful. They can be 1, they can be 60. My mom and I are still improving our relationship based off this understanding of each other. She no longer asks me to be something I'm not. And it's very, very nice. We'll see you again next Wednesday.